Last time we highlighted a class based off of a hero of the Imperium, and now we're going to give some love to the forces of chaos. Today we are going over a class all based around the legendary Kharn the Betrayer from the World Eaters. So, for those of you that don't know, Kharn, he was one of the captains of the World Leaders, absolutely famous for his brutal duels inside the dueling cages and on the battlefield as well. Just an absolutely brutal opponent to fight. During the Siege of Terra, which includes some of his greatest feats, Kharn killed, I believe I read somewhere that it was estimated to be within the millions. In fact, that was one of the reasons why Sigismund was unleashed to single out Kharn in combat, just because he had racked up such a massive kill count that people were legitimately concerned that Kharn and his emissaries might actually breach in onto Terra purely based off of the amount of blood that this man was spilling. Now, he was ultimately defeated in single combat, surprisingly rather easily by Sigismund. However, he did such a good job of collecting skulls for the Skull Throne that Kharn wasn't going to leave him dead for long, and even during the Siege of Terra, he was resurrected. However, he really did not engage much further with the battle. Now, he earned the name Kharn the Betrayer because after the Siege of Terra was over and the forces of the War Master began to retreat from the Loyalists, eventually the World Eaters would find themselves engaged in a battle with the Emperor's children on a planet that was honestly extremely cold, to the point where even the Astartes wanted to take a break by it. Kharn got a little upset by this, grabbed the flamethrower, began to remove the temperature problem from some of his nearby allies by setting them ablaze and encouraging them to go charging back into the battle, earning him the nickname the Betrayer. So we are going to be building a class based off of him today. Real quick, in terms of the drip, because remember, looking cool, it's the most important part of the battle. You will be able to utilize everything without the need of DLC content here. And of course, we don't have any specifically chaos themed cosmetics, so you're going to have to take a lot of liberties with this. But we're going to start off with the Survivor's Helm. Now, you can earn this by completing the first 7 operations on lethal difficulty. It only has to be the first 7, and also it can only be the first 7, but you have to be able to accomplish all 7 of them on lethal difficulty. That can be by yourself or with teammates, whatever it is. Just as long as you complete that, you will unlock the Survivor's Helm. Mainly went with this because it does feature, as you can see here, well, now you can see it, does feature a lot of scars on the front, kind of indicating that our character here, which we're basing off of Kharn, has seen a lot of close quarters battle, which was Kharn's bread and butter. So we are running that. We are running one of the standard left pauldrons, just something so you can tag on the World Eater's emblem there. Plus, it does also have a skull, which does fit with the theme that we're going. Next, we are going to be using the veteran right pauldron. Now, this is something that you will have to unlock through accolades. Because it is a cosmetic, it only costs 200 points. However, if you don't have access to this, honestly, I feel like you could just simply throw in the molecular bonding studs or anything that would kind of match with something early on from early Warhammer 40k. Moving on to the chest plate here, we are going to be grabbing the Mark X Tacticus, which I believe that's what they're all called, but we're going with the one that has all 3 skulls on it. Again, just because we want to have skulls for the Skull Throne there. And it's the one that kind of looks the least loyalist. Again, same thing with the backpack. We're just grabbing a standard backpack here. And then, now this might be a little bit of a grind, but if you have hit 4th Prestige, you will have access to this variant of the Omni Scrambler, which does have a little servo skull on the back. Now, if you haven't hit Prestige 4, but you do have the Space Wolves DLC, you can simply substitute in the Space Wolves Champion. Personally, I prefer the one that you unlock through 4th Prestige, just because you get a little bit more movement out of the skull back there. Then we're going to be using just any of the left gauntlets that you want to. But probably one of the better details that we can get is we're going to be using the Artificier right gauntlet here. And the main reason is the World Eaters were actually the first ones to chain their melee weapons to their body. That's actually where Sigismund got the idea. I know in a lot of artwork you typically see like the Black Templars with their weapons, specifically their melee weapons, chained to their body. That actually came from the World Eaters, and so this is just a really small detail that we can utilize for that. Then just go with whatever legs that you want. Again, I only chose these because they have a lot of skulls on them and it kind of fits the theme. But moving on to the weapon setup here, so really the bread and butter of this is going to be the power axe. I personally, in terms of ranged weapons, I went with the Melta rifle and the Inferno pistol. However, they're not really as important. The main reason is we're going to want to focus on melee combat. That's what a lot of the perks are going to be set up to. Really, I just went with these because they burned people up. That's kind of how Kharn got his nickname, The Betrayer. So that's what I threw on. Now, I know this does very well limit you in terms of your range capacity. So if you want to try and stick as true as you can to it, you can simply grab the Volkite pistol, which will give you a little bit more range, especially when you compare it to the Melta rifle and the Inferno pistol itself. Now, moving on to the power axe, we're actually going to be grabbing the Relic Alpha, and this is the balanced one. Initially, I was thinking of going with the Gamma variant, which is the block version, just because you can get some really brutal damage with this. However, I kind of felt that the balanced power axe came the closest. The main idea with this is, yes, Kharn, he is a World Eater. They are a little bit nuts just due to the butcher's nails inside their head. However, Kharn is one that's actually kind of able to overcome the nails to an extent. He isn't completely lost to bloodlust all the time, especially in a lot of the books and novels. There are times where you can see that Kharn he's still capable of rational thinking, even if he can't fully express it. And I feel that this power axe does the best with it. Granted, if we wanted something true, we should have a chain axe, specifically his personal one known as Gore Child. But this one here, it's got a fair bit of strength. It's also relatively fast, not as fast as the fencing variant, but it also has a good bit of cleaving damage as well, which is something that you see in a lot of the media associated with Kharn. He just cleaves right through the battlefield, and this one actually has more cleaving potential than the block variant of it. And also, even though he is a World Eater and he's not completely there, he is also still a very capable duelist. He wasn't just someone who would power through the field, even though if he was fighting just regular Imperial troopers, very easily going to overpower them. But when it came to fighting other Astartes, even when the Butcher's nails were biting, he was still very much in control. He could parry, he could block, he could really do whatever he needed. It just so happened that when it came to the duel with Sigismund at that point had become the Emperor's champion and had just completely power-scaled Kharn. But Kharn is still a very formidable opponent, so I didn't want to completely remove the ability to parry with him. Now, moving on into the perks, and I will say you're actually going to have a little bit more flexibility with this particular class than when we did the Sigismund one. And as always, we're not going to worry about the prestige perks because not everybody's going to be at prestige 4. If you have them, cool, you can throw on whatever you want to there. Again, they do cost 750 points just to go back and refresh them. Personally, I don't think it's worth it to constantly switch back and forth between just a little bit of a gimmick class and then into something that you can consistently run. But we're going to start off with Melee Mastery. This is just a general 10% melee damage increase against Majoris level enemies and higher. Nothing too fancy, or I'm sorry, yeah, Majoris level enemies and higher. Nothing too fancy, but it is just giving us a melee boost. Then we are going to Duelist. So because we are using the balanced version, this is going to help us quite a bit with being able to still stay defensive when we need to. So your perfect parry and block windows, they're going to be increased by 50% overall. And then moving on to retribution. Now, this might be an oddball one to grab since this class is more heavily melee focused. However, if your ranged weapons magazine is out of ammo, you get a 25% melee damage increase to all enemies. To me, this is something where you can just fire off all your ammo right at the start, and as long as you don't reload, you have a 25% damage increase. Now, if you don't like that, you want to mix it up a little bit, you can go with honed reactions, which is whenever your health is at 50% or less, your perfect dodge window is going to be doubled. I think that both of these fit in. I just like the additional melee damage that you can get through retribution. Moving on to the team perk. Again, you do have some flexibility here. I personally went with unmatched zeal because I kind of like the idea of whenever you take out some of the more important targets, it kind of triggers that bloodlust of wanting to just keep going and keep fighting. And so the ability to heal yourself from finishers on extremist or terminus level enemies, it's something that just kind of helps keep you into the fight and keeps the blood flowing. However, if you don't want to do that, you want to run something a little bit different, melee champion is perfectly fine. It's a generic 15% melee damage boost to not just you, but everybody else in the team. Now, moving on to the gear selection here, this is really where you have a lot more flexibility. You can kind of build it however you want. I haven't read anything that showed Kharn using a grappling hook. However, I feel that the Vanguard is still kind of the best class to represent him. So we have the options. We're going to utilize them. Now, with the last patch that came out, the diving kick actually received a couple buffs, which I have been a big fan of. And so I kind of wanted to also use this class to highlight some of those buffs. So we're going to start off with diving kick, which is going to deal additional damage to enemies within a 5-meter radius. So whatever target it is that you hit, you're going to deal a little bit of splash damage to everyone in the immediate area. Again, if you don't want to utilize this one, you can simply switch over to collateral damage, which is where the diving kick itself deals 50% more damage, and it's going to hit everything on the way to the grapple launcher's target. Again, I think Shockwave is just better because it also pairs really well with our next perk here, Tenacity. So this is kind of where some of the range damage is going to play a decent part in it. What's really cool about this, so anytime you get a ranged kill on a Majora's level enemy, now keep in mind there is going to be a cooldown timer for this. It's very forgiving though, it's 15 seconds. Your next diving kick, its damage is going to be increased by 130%. This also stacks with the Shockwave perk. So it's extremely possible that if you have a bunch of Majoras that are grouped up together, as long as you got a ranged kill on one within a short period of time, you can actually knock out entire groups of Majora's level enemies on even ruthless, lethal, and absolute, because now the diving kick, its damage does also scale to the difficulty that you're on. So this is actually a really great way to set up a lot of Majoras and even at times extremist enemies to be within that executable range. Now, moving on to the last one, I went with combat readiness, which is just going to allow us to recharge the grapple a little bit quicker. Again, I'm just running this because with the new buffs, I've really enjoyed using the grapple launcher as more of a strategic piece instead of just using it to zipline from one engagement to the other. I now find there to be a lot of strategic value in it. Again, though, if that's not your thing, you do have some freedom with this. All three of these are equally as good, but you could run Thrill of the Fight, which is going to cause you to take 20% less health damage for 5 seconds after a parry, block, or dodge, which just with the combat loop of this game, you're going to be doing pretty frequently already. So it's a nice way to keep yourself alive and still in the fight. Or if I had to pick a second one, it would be Grim Determination, which is just any time that the launcher is on cooldown, you get a 15% weapon damage increase that is ranged and melee. So it's just another further buff to add on to some of the buffs that we're already getting. Now, for the signature perk, again, you have a couple different options that you can run here. I personally went with Emperor's Blessing, and the reason that I went with this is because technically, again, Kharn was killed, but he was given a second chance, and that's exactly what Emperor's Blessing does. If you were to take a hit that would initially put you into being incapacitated, or if you already have a mortal wound just flat out killing you, this will actually keep you alive and in the battle. It's very similar to one of the sniper perks, whereas the sniper, it triggers your camo and you become invulnerable. This one, however, will just refill all of your armor immediately. There's a 2-minute cooldown timer on this, but again, I think it does a really nice job of representing the fact that Kharn technically was killed, however, he was brought back to life, and I feel that this does a pretty good job of representing that. However, of course, again, I don't think really the signature perk here really matters a whole lot. So if you want to run tactical prowess, or you want to run adrenaline rush to keep you more in the fight, if you do find yourself struggling a little bit, adrenaline rush might be the better option to go with. But I think thematically, Emperor's Blessing is the correct choice here. But overall, that's my build for Kharn. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Also, don't hesitate to throw out some other characters that maybe you'd like to see a class build around. I have also been, I guess just to give you guys a little bit of a sneak peek, trying to toy around with some ideas for Garviel Loken from the Luna Wolves, so I think that's maybe the next class that we're going to take a look at. I just want to go through and evaluate a couple different weapon options for them. The weapons that I have right here, they're just the ones that I typically play with. But I do have some ideas on how I would like to set this class up. So that's maybe what's coming in the future, but feel free to let me know some characters that you would like to see. And as always, thank you for watching, and we will catch you next time.